Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. Michael Matt down here in the catacombs. We have 3 points to bring up tonight. Number 1, the Grammys 2014. You know, last week we took a few hits on our comm boxes for having asserted that the music industry itself is somewhat Christophobic. I don't care to go back and revisit why we said that. I just want to use the 2014 Grammy Awards ceremony as Exhibit A for why we won't be apologizing tonight for having made that assertion last time. Now, of course, everyone knows the Grammys is the big show for music, the Gramophone Award, as it was originally called. It is the National Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences of the United States' effort to recognize outstanding achievement in the music industry, so it's fairly official. This time, the Grammys featured all sorts of fun things. We had Jay-Z and his lovely wife, Beyonce, who's a delicate young thing. I'm not sure what they were doing on stage. I have no idea how to describe what was happening. Some sort of air copulation. I'm not sure really what it was, but they got very carried away and did their thing. Then we had our friend Katy Perry, who, again, it's hard to describe. Some sort of a Stevie Nicks redo, I guess, would be the best way to do that for her song Dark Horse, which featured Juicy J, who's really good. And, well, they used a broom. They had brooms up there, witch's broom. She's dressed as a witch, and she has a great big red cross across her chest, and she's cavorting around. And they used broomsticks inverted as stripper poles, which was interesting. And they had sort of a lot of demons and hellish things running around on the stage during the performance. Now, again, always worried about being the church lady up here. I'll just give you some reactions from some folks who are a lot younger than I am. Online, sort of the paragon of pop culture commentary, actually described it as diabolically inspired, filled with fire, dark symbolism, and hellish imagery. Online said this. There was some poor Christian gospel singer there by the name of Natalie Grant who actually had to leave the Grammys early because she was so upset by what Miss Berry was doing up there. And then, of course, we have the former Alabama quarterback A.G. McCarron, who I think gets right to the point when he says, quote, "Is it just me, or is there some of the Grammy performances so far..." Wait, let me start over. "Is it just me, or are some of the Grammy performances so far seem to be really demonic? Looks like there's a lot of evil in the world." And that's from A.J. McCarron. Now, I thought it'd be interesting. Actually, we've seen this before, this sort of cavorting about during the music awards. But I wonder what would happen if Katy Perry had shown up with a crescent, an Islamic crescent on her breasts, or perhaps a Star of David. I wonder what would happen. I don't think it would have gotten the reception that it did, but that's just the way it is. Christians don't seem to have any interest whatsoever in standing up and defending their religion because it really doesn't matter to too many Christians anymore. But that was just the warm-up. Next up for the Grammys, we had Madonna and some of her friends. Madonna, who's definitely a spent piece of used jet trash now, but she's still out there doing her thing. Now, she sang the song Same Love. I have no idea where that song came from, with something called Macklemore and Ryan Lewis. And this is, again, at the Grammys, the Staples Center. And then Queen Latifah came out and performed some sort of marriage ceremony. I'm not sure where Queen Latifah gets off playing the part of parson or some sort of preacher, but she was the one who officiated over sort of a massive gay marriage that took place at the Grammys this year, 2014, in which 34 couples, straight and gay, old and young, got together and got themselves hitched, became sort of life buddies, or whatever they're calling it now, in some sort of marriage ceremony. Again, I don't know if this is enough, but I think that I can be forgiven for not issuing an apology for saying or claiming that the music industry itself has become pretty darn near Christophobic in general across the board. This marriage ceremony, for example, that's just a shot to the solar plexus. No, it's worse than that. That's the music industry telling what's left of Christian America to go to hell. Now, we don't know this, of course. We haven't picked up on it yet because there's a couple of bands that are pretty good still, and we don't want to, cast aspersion on the entire industry, right? So in typical fashion, mealy-mouthed, weak-kneed American fashion, we're not going to object to what happened at the Grammys because we believe in the separation of church and state and expression and all this nonsense, and so we continue to lose. But this program tonight is really not about culture. I wanted to talk about, once again, I want to revisit the idea of internecine squabbling among traditional Catholics. Which brings us to point number 2, the Fraternity of St. Peter down in Mexico. So, all kidding aside, I mean, we're all used to what's been happening in the music industry, the entertainment industry in general for a lot of years, and I don't think there's any reason to get much more worked up about what happened on this particular Grammy night as opposed to others in the past, especially in the recent few years. But I do think that what's happening culturally, especially with the entertainment industry, should give all tradition-minded Catholics some indicator of where we stand on the timeline. Now, you have this very powerful industry when a primetime slot, an entertainment night of awards, again, telling Christian America exactly where they can go, having no care whatsoever, no concern whatsoever. So in other words, Christian America has lost any clout, any ability to, call for boycotts or do much of anything about anything that's going on. As I say, Katy Perry with the cross across her breast during this bizarre performance of hers doesn't even really get a blip on the screen. It's whatever. Everybody's used to it. I would think that would suggest to all of us that the day is coming when Christian America, what's left of it, or those of us who would take a stand against this cultural sort of rot, are going to be running into actual persecution from people who don't want to hear the Catholic or the Christian voice and message anymore in society. That's what's happening globally. Everywhere you look, they're trying to stifle and shut down the Catholic Church's moral authority. Seems to me that would give us a pretty good indication that it's time to sort of circle the wagons or form some kind of an ad hoc committee or some sort of an alliance internationally among those who still care. And I'm talking about tradition-minded Catholics. So let me give you an example of a concern that I have, and I think a lot of people have this concern. I was down in Mexico just last week for the Catholic Identity Conference Planning Committee, which I really hope everybody will keep this conference in mind. The Catholic Identity Conference out near Steubenville, Ohio, happens in October. Anyway, we're down there for a planning committee to plan this meeting. And there were a couple of priests from the Fraternity of St. Peter on hand who were offering daily masses at Playa del Carmen, which is a very, sort of a tourist, a beach town. And they were saying the traditional Latin Mass right on the main street of Playa del Carmen. And it was very interesting to see the reaction from tourists, from locals, from people who hadn't seen the Mass in 40 years, Latin Mass in 40 years, to young people who had never seen it at all. It was beautiful. I saw young people coming in. They're awestruck by what they see. They kneel down. They watch this Mass. Of course, they're confused. They've never seen it before. Father Jonathan Romanowski of the Fraternity of St. Peter gave beautiful sermons during the Masses about what the Mass is supposed to be, what the traditional Mass represents, and how we need to get back to that. Sort of instructional sermons for the folks who would show up. Anyway, we rolled cameras down there, and we made a little video showing the reactions of the natives and of the tourists to the traditional Latin Mass. Posted the video. Figured it might be something that people would enjoy seeing, something positive for a change. And for the most part, people did. But there was this sort of odd mix of comments at YouTube and over at our website and on Facebook from folks, traditionalists, who evidently the sight of this young priest offering the traditional Latin Mass really ticked them off for some reason. They just couldn't handle it. They didn't like it because they have some angst against the Fraternity of St. Peter. And this just seems like a really troubling thing for us, for our movement, that we would look at the image of a young priest a million miles from home offering the traditional Latin Mass for folks that hadn't seen it ever or hadn't seen it in a long time, and that somehow makes us angry. This is a problem. I can't understand why anyone would see it that way, but that's the way they're seeing it. So we saw sarcastic comments about, I'm sure Father Romanowski was teaching them that Vatican II is just great and that the new Mass is fine for those who prefer it. Well, in fact, that's not what was going on. This young priest was doing a beautiful thing. Now, think about this for a moment. This young priest grew up in Pennsylvania. He's in Guadalajara, Mexico, a trillion miles from anything, trying to help people save their souls, setting up an apostolate to try to give the Mass and sacraments to people who are starving for it. Well, why in the world would any sane, tradition-minded Catholic, or any Catholic period, look at this young man and find problems with what he's doing? This really speaks of a problem. It's not a massive or an overarching problem in the traditional movement, but it's a problem that we have people that would react that way to what he's doing. They say he's trying to destroy the Society of St. Pius X. He's down there to try to mess up with, to sort of confuse people and draw them away from the society. Really? Really? You think that's what he's doing? Going all the way down there, giving his whole life to the church, to Christ, to the liturgy, to the people, to the souls, just to be political, just to tick off a few people on Facebook who prefer the Society of St. Pius X? This is ridiculous. This doesn't make any sense, especially if we think of it in terms of what's happening culturally, in terms of what's happening in the government, what's happening in Rome. We're in a very dangerous time right now, and Catholics need to wake up to the fact that it's very necessary for us to put our heads together somehow and come to the conclusion that there just might be salvation outside of the parking lot where our little chapel is located. There might be priests who don't go to our particular chapel, society, fraternity who are actually doing God's will. I think maybe it's time we take a look at that and be open to that possibility. Which brings us to point 3 with respect to a leaked document from the Society of St. Pius X. So this is something I believe that we as lay Catholics can do something about. I think when you consider what's happening in the church and in the world, everyone knows things are not good, and it's very incumbent upon us to try to do something to prepare. I don't think any one of us want to one day be in the gulag and thinking back to the days when we actually had an opportunity to stand up and say something constructive and to unite with our brothers and to fight against those who hate Christ. But instead of doing that, we spend our time fighting and warring against each other, against other traditional priests, other traditional people who don't go to the same chapel or the same church that we go to, and for whatever reason are happy and satisfied, and their souls and their children's souls are being served by priests from the various orders. Now, I think that we've made a lot of progress in this regard. I think that the leadership of the fraternity, the society, the Institute of Christ the King have, for the most part, sort of abandoned this idea of going after the other priestly fraternities as competition and saying this and that and attacking. And I think that's good. They're showing us a great example, and I think it's possible for us to follow that example and to erect a constructive counter-revolutionary attitude amongst ourselves. Now, the case in point would be a document that was recently leaked on the internet. It's Father Nicholas Pfluger, who is the second in charge of the Society of St. Pius X. In France, he gave a retreat to the brothers over Christmas in 2013 and pretty much admits this. And it's a statement that I think is well worth quoting here. It's short. But Father Pfluger says, he admits that there's a problem, that everyone is in a position right now where we need to tighten things up a little bit. And so he says, since 2006, we, the Society of St. Pius X, have lost 60 priests. And it is not because of Rome. While the Fraternity of St. Peter, they have 250 priests and have had almost no departures. There really is a problem. Of course, we have to maintain our line, but the church is being humiliated. We must be like the Good Samaritan. We must love the church. We sometimes have idealized our fight, and it has become an obsession to hit at the other institutions. Of course, they are not perfect, but neither are we, end quote. And he goes on in that vein. I think this is a statement of humility and prudence from an older priest who's looking at the big picture internationally. He's seeing what's happening to the church, to the bride of Christ, as the mystical body of Christ is going through a passion right now, and the world is reacting in demonic fashion against the mystical body of Christ. Our priests are trying to show us the way, and I think it's absolutely our obligation as lay people to abandon the old fights from 25 years ago, to stop the internecine squabbling, and to do whatever we possibly can to form a united and constructive front against those who are Christophobic, who hate the church, who hate Christ, and who hate everything that we as Catholics stand for. It's just a little point, but I'm asking you to prayerfully to join us, to join me in this lay effort to try to do something about the divisions in the camps of traditional Catholicism, which the divisions which are not helping the church, not serving the church, not serving souls, and it's something that we can do something about right away. Let's give it a try. We'll revisit this in the next few issues of The Underground, but for now, thanks very much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.